Today's video is all about rent guarantors. What are they? Why would you take one? Do you need one? What are they all about? So people that step in to pretty much guarantee to pay the rent in case your tenant can't or won't pay. Welcome back to Property Insight. My name's Mark Ashworth.
And I'm Neil Harding.
So rent guarantors, it's I think probably getting a bit more common. Certainly for us in my business, I use guarantors a bit more often than I used to. They are a really good way of, let's say, adding a little bit more credibility to your tenant, your prospective tenant.
I think at the start of a tenancy, it can be a really good idea to take a guarantor. If you have any kind of a doubt at all as to the affordability for your prospective tenant on the rent, well, a rent guarantor could be the way to go. I mean, I tend to prefer rent guarantee insurance if I've got any kind of a doubt around affordability. However, to get rent guarantee insurance, then, or landlord's insurance as it's sometimes called, well, typically someone would need to pass a credit reference check and there might be various other hoops to jump through. If they don't pass a certain level of credit, but you're satisfied that they can afford the rent, then maybe, just in case they can't afford to pay the rent 1 month, a rent guarantor is the way to go. It also helps get comfortable that they are going to be a good, reliable tenant because they know somebody in their network who's willing to put their name to paper to say, yep, they're good for it.
And this could be, the guarantor typically could be either a friend, it could be a work colleague, it can't be an employer. Interestingly, I've had people before try and tell me that their employer would be happily to be a rent guarantor, but it can't really be an employer because obviously they're paying their wages. So therefore, if the relationship was to break down there, the chances of them actually agreeing to pay the rent would fall over somewhere there. But typically it would be a family member, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, family member or friend, I think is quite common. Yeah, and that's what I've seen.
So what is involved? I mean, I guess they have to sign some kind of document in order to, say that they're happy to do that. And then do they have to undergo a credit check, would you say? Or?
Yeah, so for my properties where I've got a guarantor for the rent, my letting agent takes care of all this for me, and they will run a credit check on the guarantor. And sort of bizarrely, like going back to that point around rent guarantee insurance, if the guarantor passes the affordability on the credit reference, then they'll provide insurance. And I always think that's really then a bit pointless because if you've got a guarantor, that kind of is your insurance for the rent, I think. So why would you then have insurance against that insurance as well? It just seems a bit circular and a bit unnecessary. But yeah, the guarantor is signing a contract to say, in the event that the tenant doesn't pay, I will. So it is a serious commitment.
Yeah, because the rent guarantee insurance used to be, when I had used it in the past, was typically around about £100, £120. These days it's looking, well, certainly, I don't know whether it's based on the amount of rent that's paid. I guess it probably does have an effect on the premium, which is maybe the reason why it's gone up a bit. But I think it's more in the region of £200 to £250 now for a 12-month period, which obviously a credit check on a guarantor is going to cost less than that. And so there is some argument to say that it's cheaper to go with a guarantor. It's probably not as easy with an insurance company. You tend to, the annoying thing about insurance I find is that they will only insure you if there's almost zero reason why that person might not pay the rent. If there's any chance that they will not pay the rent at any point, then the insurance premium either goes up or they say, no, we're not going to insure you. So almost by applying for it and them saying, yes, it's approved, is almost in itself a test to see whether or not you've taken on a decent tenant.
Yeah. So some things to look out for and top tips for guarantors. So which you might not know, that's probably less well known. If you increase the rent during the period of the tenancy, using Section 13 notice to increase rents with a Form 4. I think we've done a separate video on that. But if you do that at any point, maybe after 12 months, the rent goes up, it's worth knowing that the guarantor hasn't agreed in their original guarantor agreement this higher level of rent. What they agreed to was the original rent in the original tenancy agreement. Let's just say that's £600 a month, right? So that's what they're guaranteeing. If you increase the rent to £650 and then £700, let's say the tenant's been in there 10 years and they're now paying £1,000 a month. If for any reason after 10 years they stop paying and you need to go to the guarantor and ask for the rent, you'll only be able to go after them for £600 a month. That's all they've guaranteed, not the £1,000. And even if you've put something like a clause into the guarantor document that says, you know, you will also be guaranteeing rent increases, the chances are that that clause will just be thrown out of court if it ever came to it, because it would just be unreasonable, because how could the person giving that guarantee ever really reasonably know what those increases would be over a period of years? They wouldn't, so it would just be an unfair clause.
So the tip there is to, when you do increase your rent, is just to make sure that you send off the guarantee form again to the guarantor and ask them to re-sign it, assuming that you want to continue the guarantor. I mean, there is some argument to say that if your tenant's been in place for 3, 4, 5 years and they've been continually paying on time every single month, that the guarantor isn't necessarily still required, because it's already done the job of making sure that you've got a good tenant in there. Because ultimately these things are all about relationships and about building relationships and about tenants being happy and landlords being happy. That's kind of what we want, right? In any property, or in any business, doesn't have to be property. You want the customer to be happy. You want the service that you're providing to be good quality, and that that the tenant's paying a fair rent for a fair product and service. And assuming that they're still paying, sort of is indicative of the fact that, you know, that they're getting what that they were promised.
Absolutely.
It's usually when things fall over on that maybe perhaps landlords or property owners won't do what they say they're going to do, or don't do repairs and things like that, where these issues come up, and generally down to lack of communication and bad management, effectively, that you end up then getting tenants that don't want to pay. Nevertheless, it's always important to have your paperwork in place. So are there any other tips on there, Neil?
Yeah, another top tip as well is sometimes if the tenancy period goes to, let's say, 12 months, then you might start conversations with the tenant about, would you like to stay for another 12 months? And quite often, off the back of that, the tenant says yes. And sometimes you'll agree a new tenancy period, maybe for another 12 months. That might be the same rent, might be a higher amount of rent. But if a new tenancy agreement is signed, then you do need to get a new guarantor agreement in place for that new tenancy agreement as well. If you don't, then don't think that the previous guarantee document that you've got from the original tenancy agreement still stands, because it won't be valid anymore. Because what that guarantee related to was your initial tenancy agreement. That's what the guarantor was guaranteeing. So if you then subsequently replace it with a new tenancy agreement, even if it's the same tenant, then that original guarantor doesn't stand anymore. So just be aware of that.
On the deed of guarantee document that we use, it actually specifically says it refers to the tenancy dated X. So if you've got a tenancy agreement that's dated X and it's the original one, and it flicks to a rolling periodic tenancy, that tenancy agreement is still in place, irrelevant of whether it goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 10 years. However, if you sign a new tenancy agreement with a new date, then that guarantor document then will not apply to the new tenancy, as Neil said. So yeah.
Okay, well, we hope you found that really insightful. If you've enjoyed that, please do comment, like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us deliver you more valuable content in the future, and see you next time.